They say women were made to be soft, silent, submissive. That leadership was for men, and obedience was for women. They say a woman's voice was never meant to speak against power, that her place was in the shadows behind the tent, never in front of the crowd. But the Bible? The Bible tells another story, a story of a woman who danced with a nation, who sang victory when an empire fell, a woman whose words once brought people to praise, but later brought judgment from God himself. This is not the story of a weak woman. It's the story of Miriam, the prophetess of Israel, in the day her voice crossed a line that heaven could not ignore. And if you think spiritual authority, pride, leadership, and gender never collided in Scripture, buckle up, because this one's going to shake you. Before we begin, if you believe the hidden stories of women in the Bible deserve to be told in full, uncut, unfiltered, and unapologetic, smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Women in the Bible, because today we're restoring a voice history tried to silence. Before the leprosy, before the shame, before the exile and the silence, there was a little girl. She was hiding in the reeds of the Nile, heart pounding, eyes locked on a floating basket. The sun was harsh above her, casting flickers of light over the muddy waters, but her focus never shifted. Inside that basket was everything, her baby brother. His name would be Moses. Her name was Miriam. And even as a child, Miriam showed uncommon courage. She watched as the basket drifted closer and closer to Pharaoh's daughter, an Egyptian princess draped in gold, surrounded by guards with the power to either rescue or destroy. But when the moment came, it wasn't the princess who moved first. It was the slave girl in the shadows. "Should I fetch a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" Miriam's voice broke the air like thunder. Her words, bold, crisp, daring, cut through fear and hierarchy like a blade. The princess turned, startled, but in Miriam's eyes she saw not just fear, but fire, conviction, intelligence, courage. And in that moment, an Egyptian royal and a Hebrew slave girl became unlikely partners in a divine plan. The princess nodded. Miriam ran, heart pounding, limbs flying, to fetch their mother. Not just Moses' mother, her mother. And just like that, the child would live. Not only live, but grow up in the halls of Pharaoh, eat at the tables of kings, be trained in the wisdom of Egypt, and none of it would have happened without the courage of a little girl in the reeds. Have you ever had to speak up when everything in you wanted to stay silent? What gave you the courage? Tell us in the comments, because like Miriam, sometimes one voice is all it takes to change everything. Years passed. The little girl in the reeds became a woman, a leader. Moses had fled Egypt. Aaron had stepped into his priestly role. But Miriam rose too, not as a background figure, not just as Moses' sister, but as a prophetess, a woman with divine insight, respected by a nation, still learning how to be free. And when the sea split, when walls of water stood tall like towers on either side, when Pharaoh's army drowned beneath the crashing waves, it wasn't Moses who led the song, it was Miriam. She picked up her tambourine, her feet beat the dust, her voice soared. "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider he has thrown into the sea." The people followed, her rhythm, her joy, her faith. Fires lit across the desert that night, not from anger, but celebration. Thousands danced, women laughed, children stared in awe. Miriam's song wasn't just music, it was leadership, it was memory, it was power. She had become a symbol of deliverance, a matriarch in the wilderness, a woman trusted to speak when the heavens thundered. And they listened. They listened because she had seen the worst. Egypt's chains, a baby brother nearly taken, a nation nearly crushed. And now she was leading them into a promise. From the muddy banks of the Nile to the parted waters of the Red Sea, Miriam had always stood at the edge of miracles. Who would have thought, she might have whispered to herself, that the little girl in the reeds would one day lead a nation's praise? I didn't ask for this, but I was made for this. Her eyes met Aaron's. She didn't need to speak. She was already leading, with her hands, her voice, her presence. Have you ever felt like you were born for something bigger, even when no one else saw it? Drop your answer in the comments, because someone out there might need the courage you carry inside. But something shifted. As the years wore on, as the wilderness stretched longer than anyone imagined, Miriam changed. Leadership was no longer filled with tambourines and dancing. It was dust. It was drought. It was the same complaints day after day. We're thirsty. We're hungry. Why did you bring us here to die? She had led them in song. Now she led them in silence. And that silence grew heavy. Moses carried the weight of an entire nation. Every cry, every failure, every rebellion. Aaron stood between life and death, his priestly hands stained by sacrifice after sacrifice. He offered atonement, intercession, fire, blood. And Miriam watched it all, still a prophetess, still respected, still followed. But inside something simmered. Why does God speak only to Moses? Haven't I been faithful too? Without me, he wouldn't have even survived the Nile. Without me, there would have been no song, no dance, no hope. Do they forget that I was there first? The cracks were subtle. They began as whispers, then questions, then quiet accusations. It wasn't open rebellion. It was a rebellion of the heart, a rebellion born not from hatred, but from feeling overlooked. 40 years, sand beneath her feet. Manna every morning, no home, no throne, just tents, complaints, and expectations. Even miracles became monotonous. The fire by night, the cloud by day. A routine of glory they had come to take for granted. And in that space between miracles, the human heart grew restless. The people murmured. So did Aaron. And eventually, so did Miriam. The one who once led the people with praise was now leading them into criticism. Have you ever felt overlooked, like your contribution didn't matter anymore? Have you ever watched someone else rise while you stood still? Tell us honestly in the comments. Your story might be closer to Miriam's than you think. It began with a whisper, a question, almost innocent. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? But behind that question was more than curiosity. It was resentment, cloaked in righteousness. Miriam and Aaron together began to murmur, not in front of Moses, behind him, quietly, carefully. And then, the criticism turned personal. He married a Cushite woman, a simple statement, but one loaded with meaning. Cush, a region of dark-skinned Africans, ancient Ethiopia, the land of black kings and queens, of warriors and wealth, of skin kissed by the equator. Moses had married a black woman, and that, for Miriam, was enough to speak out. But was this really about his wife? Or was it about Moses' authority? Was it racial, cultural, spiritual? Or was the woman just a scapegoat for something deeper? He chose her, a foreigner, a Cushite, not one of us. Does he think only he can hear from God now? We were there when the miracles happened. He's not the only one with a calling. This wasn't rebellion like Korah. This wasn't building golden calves. This was a spiritual woman using spiritual language to hide a very human wound. She wasn't fighting truth. She was fighting the feeling of being left behind. The camp was quiet, but the tension, tangible. Women carrying baskets paused to glance. Children hushed. Priests looked away. Because when a prophetess speaks, even in doubt, the people listen. And God was listening too, not just to the words, but to the motives behind them. This wasn't just about marriage. This wasn't about race alone. It was about ego, about position, about a sister watching her younger brother rise further than she ever could. Let's be real. Have you ever judged someone, but deep down, it wasn't really about them? It was about what you felt you were missing? Drop your truth in the comments. Let's talk about it. God hears everything, the whispers behind tent walls, the murmurings spoken in holy tones, even the thoughts we never dare say out loud. And this time, he does not stay silent. Come out, he says. Moses, Aaron, Miriam. No explanation, no delay, just a summons from heaven. The entire camp watches. 3 siblings, leaders of Israel, walk side by side, but not united. Each step toward the tent of meeting is heavy. Each heart beats faster. But for Miriam, it pounds with dread. The sky dims. The camp goes silent. Even the wind holds its breath. Then, the cloud descends. God himself comes down, and his voice, it is not gentle. Listen to my words. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself in visions. I speak in dreams. But this is not so with my servant Moses. With him I speak face to face, clearly not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant? This isn't just defense. This is declaration. God doesn't just affirm Moses, he elevates him, face to face. Clarity, not riddles. Faithful in all my house, and the unspoken line is clear. You weren't just insulting Moses, you were questioning me. The cloud begins to lift, but the weight of those words still crushes the earth. Then, horror. Miriam gasps. Her skin turns white, not glowing, rotting, flaking, bleeding, leprosy, the most feared disease in Israel, the ultimate mark of divine judgment. Aaron turns. His face contorts in shock. Miriam, his sister, the prophetess, now unclean. Her fall is not private. It is public, irreversible, immediate, absolute. Have you ever crossed a line and immediately realized you couldn't take it back? What was your moment of too far? Let us know in the comments. Your moment of honesty might speak healing into someone else's life. Aaron stares at his sister. His knees buckle. His priestly hands, the same ones that held incense for the people, now tremble before the sight of divine judgment. His voice shakes. Please, my Lord, do not hold against us the sin we have so foolishly committed. There is no defense, no excuse, just desperation. Do not let her be like a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb with its flesh half eaten away. It's graphic, it's raw, it's a brother watching his sister rot alive. And he begs not God, but Moses, Aaron and the high priest, the one chosen to intercede for the people, can't even intercede for himself. Now he's pleading with the one he once questioned. Moses looks at Miriam. The tambourine is gone. Her eyes once lit with praise, now swollen with pain, and his heart breaks. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't remind them of their sin. He doesn't ask for justice. He asks for mercy. Oh God, please heal her. Please. 7 words, no speech, no strategy, just a brother's heart cracking open. Outside the tent, the people are waiting, thousands holding their breath, watching the spiritual leaders unravel before God, watching their prophetess, once revered, now ruined. And heaven is silent for a moment. Then God speaks. If her father had spit in her face, would she not be disgraced for 7 days? Confine her outside the camp for 7 days. After that, she may be brought back. No instant healing, no divine shortcut, not because God is cruel, but because he is holy. This isn't just a punishment, it's a message. A restoration must pass through humility. Have you ever had to walk through consequences even after you were forgiven? Did it shape you or break you? Drop your story in the comments. There's healing in honesty, and someone might need yours. The judgment was clear. Confine her outside the camp for 7 days. 7 days. Not in private, not in silence, but in shame, visible to everyone. The prophetess, now the outcast, the one who once led Israel in song, now sits alone in the wilderness, covered in disease. Miriam sits under a canopy of silence. The stars no longer feel like promises. The desert wind no longer feels like freedom. Her skin itches with more than illness. It burns with regret. She watches from a distance as the fire still burns in the tabernacle. The camp still breathes. But without her, the people do not move. They do not journey. They do not break camp. For 7 days, Israel waits. An entire nation put on pause. Not by war, not by famine, not by an enemy, but by the sin of one woman and the mercy of a just God. You are not forgotten, Miriam, the silence seems to whisper, but you must remember who you are and who I am. How did it come to this? Was I so blinded by my own pain that I challenged heaven itself? I saw the sea split. I saw manna fall, and still I spoke from pride. God, have mercy. And perhaps for the first time, Miriam isn't speaking for others. She's speaking for herself, not as a prophetess, not as a leader, but as a woman broken and humbled before her God. Have you ever needed to be still, to step away from the noise, to rediscover who you were before the pride, before the platform? What did your 7 days look like? Share it in the comments. Someone may still be walking through theirs right now. 7 days passed, 7 long, silent days. And then the gates opened. The woman once cast out, now restored. But this wasn't a triumphant return. There were no songs, no tambourines, no dancing at the edge of a parted sea. Only silence. Heavy, sacred silence. Miriam stepped back into the camp but left something behind in the wilderness. Pride, position, presumption. She was still a sister, still a prophetess, but she had learned that God's favor does not equal God's tolerance. The people watched her, not with hatred, but with reverence, as if they too had learned something through her exile. That leadership is fragile, that holiness demands humility, that no one, no matter how anointed, is above correction. And what's most telling, Scripture never records Miriam speaking again, not because her voice didn't matter, but because perhaps she finally understood when silence was sacred. I thought my voice led nations, but now I see even prophets must bow. I didn't lose God's love. I lost my way, and in His mercy, He showed me the path back. Have you ever had to return to something changed? Not as the hero, but as someone humbled. Was your silence misunderstood or healing? Tell your story in the comments. There is strength in silent restoration. The story is powerful, but one question still echoes. Why only Miriam? Why was she the one struck with leprosy, while Aaron, who spoke the same words, stood untouched? Did God show favoritism? Was justice unequal? Or was there something deeper? Some believe it was simply about who spoke first, that Miriam was the instigator, that her leadership, her voice, carried more influence, and with greater influence comes greater accountability. Others argue it was about visibility, that Miriam, being a female prophet, stood out more, and when she erred, the consequences were amplified. But then, a harder question arises. Was Miriam punished more because she was a woman? In a patriarchal culture where men held the priesthood and public power, Miriam's role as prophetess was already revolutionary. She had defied convention. She had stepped into spiritual authority. She had led men and women alike in worship. So when she crossed the line, was her fall from grace that much more visible, more jarring? more punished, because she had risen so high. Aaron was the high priest, the intercessor. Maybe God spared him to preserve the office. Or maybe Aaron's heart posture was different. Maybe Miriam acted from pride, while Aaron simply followed her lead in fear. We don't know for sure, but this we do know. God's judgment is never careless. It is personal, precise, and always connected to the heart behind the act. Miriam's punishment was severe, but it wasn't the end. After 7 days, she was restored, brought back into the camp, reunited with the people. But she wasn't the same. She was quieter, wiser, softer, and perhaps stronger. Though Scripture never records her speaking again, Miriam remains part of Israel's story. Her exile didn't erase her legacy. Her failure didn't cancel her calling. Her mistake didn't remove her memory. She was still the sister who saved Moses, still the prophetess who led in worship, still the woman God used, even in her silence. This story isn't just about judgment, it's about restoration, about God's justice and His mercy meeting in one life. We live in a world that either silences women or exalts them unrealistically. But Miriam's story reminds us, God sees women completely. Their courage, their flaws, their voice, their pride, their failures, and their worth. You can lead and still be corrected. You can fall and still be used. You can be silenced for a season and still hold sacred purpose. Today, many modern Miriams are navigating that same space. Women in ministry, constantly questioned. Female leaders judged harsher than their male counterparts. Sisters, mothers, daughters, who speak boldly and pay a higher price. Miriam's story speaks to them all. Let's reflect. Have you ever felt like Miriam, overlooked, judged too harshly, called, but corrected? What part of her story hits closest to home for you? Tell us in the comments below. Your voice could be the healing someone else has been waiting to hear. And if this story moved you, even a little, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video, like it, leave a comment, and subscribe to Women in the Bible, where forgotten voices rise again, and every woman's story is honored. Because if God restored Miriam, He can restore you too.